Good morning, America. Thank you for watching Taxes Made Easy. We've got a lot of news today over the weekend. Oh my goodness. I was sitting in church and was accessing some my scriptures on my phone and saw the news that Biden had officially dropped out of the race for you know the presidential election. So wow. So we're going to take a deeper dive. There's some better articles now, really parsing out some of the plans and ideas coming from the conservatives. So today we're going to really focus on tax policy, proposals for the IRS, and a lot of good news came out over the weekend. And we're going to take a deep dive in it and see really how's this going to impact you and your wallet, and dealing with the IRS. So stay tuned. A lot of news, a lot of good information, and we'll dive into it. Welcome back, everybody. So we're just going to dive into it. If you have not heard the news that Joe Biden has resigned from running for president of the United States. Again, it's out there. It's on every news station. It's the largest breaking news. I mean, the only comparable thing is when Lyndon B. Johnson, LBJ, decided not to run for another term due to Vietnam. The Viet War was extremely unpopular, especially among Democrats, and he did not have the support to continue the war. Um, and so I'm not going to dive into Vietnam, but he turned the reins over to someone else, and that's when Nixon was elected, and kind of it was a really bad time for the nation, not just Democrats, but the nation. Vietnam caused a lot of consternation and issues, especially the way the war was fought. So, just to share this first article, I just grabbed one because again, it's everywhere. Um, Joe Biden dropped out of the race, and the big question is what happens next? What's going on? The obvious choice is Kamala Harris, but not everybody's behind her. Um, so even former President Obama has suggested, and Nancy Pelosi and other huge names in the Democrat Party have suggested doing an open primary because they're concerned about her electability. Um, this next article is from Breitbart, so again, it slanted in one side, but at the same time, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., he's also running. People have forgotten about him. Hasn't dropped out. So he's running as an independent third-party candidate, but he could definitely go back and run as a Democrat. Is again claiming that the DNC is trying to rig the nominating process to get Kamala Harris as nominee. And, in his words, monumentally unpopular. So, and we had this back in 2016, for the 2016 election, that there were a lot of claims that the DNC rigged the election or the nominating process for Hillary Clinton. So, will this be an open convention? Who knows? At this point, really, it's you can't really have an open nominating process. But again, historically, now the nominations and conventions are just an informal party. There's no question who's already going to be the president. Historically, there used to be the conventions were huge as to who was actually going to get the nomination, and it was most of it's already been decided at this point, though. But it used to be very lively and actually interesting. So let's see what happens. It's going to be quite interesting on the Democrat side now when we go into their convention to see what happens and who's actually going to take away the nomination. Most likely Kamala Harris, but who knows? So moving on, my own kids even asked me about, is it safe to fly airplanes? Yes, it is safe to fly airplanes, still the safest mode of travel, but all kinds of articles about Boeing planes don't help. So the FAA is now probing Southwest Airlines after a series of issues with, guess what? Boeing jets. So another Boeing 737. And it was about 3 miles from the airport we're supposed to land, and it dropped to 175 feet. So that's 5 stories from the ground. And it was actually diverted to Fort Lauderdale for safety reasons. This is a string of Southwest flights having safety issues with Boeing jets. Another one was 9 miles from the Oklahoma City airport. Another one was, going into Vegas was only at 500 feet. And then you had another one that experienced a Dutch roll that damaged the plane from Phoenix to Arizona to Oakland, California. So again, more issues for Boeing. I think it's good that the FAA is actually getting in there and seeing what's going on. And then another issue facing airlines, and this kind of dovetails into another topic. Delta Airlines had huge flight cancellations because there was a tech outage. So this isn't connected to Boeing so much, but it is, there was a global cyber outage. 1,250 flights were canceled and 3,500 were already suspended. So that's a huge number of flights across the United States over a weekend. Some people had to rent cars, drive hundreds of miles. Others were waiting days for new flights. So at this point, we don't know what's happening with all these flights, when they're going to be up and down. So there was a software update by a global cybersecurity firm, CrowdStrike, that triggered the system problems for many airlines. Most of the other airlines have recovered, but again, it's one that really highlights the problems with technology being controlled by a few people or a few companies. And so when they do have an issue, it can cause massive issues throughout our economy. to have 5,000 more flights canceled just for Delta. Well, that affected most other airlines too, is pretty damaging. Moving through this fairly quickly. From the Epic Times, there's only 3 companies that control global access to internet trade. So again, having power concentrated in a few companies, something goes wrong with one of them or a couple of them. This is something that we're seeing more and more with tech, with social media. We're getting huge concentration in the hands of a few companies. And where's our government as far as dealing with monopolies? They've been asleep at the wheel. We've allowed huge monopolies. Again, this is talking about the June 18th issue over the weekend with CrowdStrike, and having tech oligopolies, which basically is not one company, but a few companies controlling the whole market. And so it wasn't a cyber attack. This was just them doing an update that caused huge problems. And so again, the White House, others are looking at this saying, look, we need to do something about this. This is has a huge effect on global markets and can shut down trading, which would be devastating for the economy. It would be devastating for in many ways, again, people won't be able to get goods. You'd have to actually go into a store. Sorry. But again, it's just, the technology is not foolproof, and I think we need better plans. Government is not usually the answer, but government is supposed to stop and prevent oligopolies or monopolies where you have an entire market concentrated in the hands of very few companies, or monopolies growing, as in Google, Microsoft, and Facebook, etc. So, moving on, this is an interesting thing addressing tech issues here. So, China's cars are not allowed in the United States, from what I understand. But we have self-driving vehicles that are being allowed. And they've already gone 1.8 million miles in California since 2017, and now they're approved for testing in Texas and Arizona. So these are self-driving cars, so they have a lot of technology in them, cameras, mics, GPS, LiDAR, lasers to kind of track other cars and make sure, radar and AI sensors to navigate and record, including road terrain and driving conditions, and for self-driving applications such as robotaxis. So, new technology is still being tested out. Why we're letting China bring these vehicles in the United States, I don't know, but it's already a big thing. One of the biggest issues is the privacy rights of Americans and also of national security. So the Communist Chinese Party, not our friend, has full access to all the data according to Chinese law. So Wi-Fi passwords, facial recognition, license plate tracking of dissidents who fled China. So one of the big concerns is to have the Chinese government coming after political dissidents, refugees from China, and that they've done it before. We've caught them doing it again, and so it's a huge concern from an espionage perspective. Why in the world would we let these cars drive when it allows them to go anywhere, spy, record, steal data, including near U.S. military bases or corporations? Was it last year we had the giant balloons flying over the United States? We know China's spying on us. We know they're doing everything they can to steal our tech, to spy on our military. So, to me, this is kind of a no-brainer. And why are these issues just being raised now? So, one of the concerns is you have three former former Apple employees already charged for stealing proprietary self-driving data. Um, they only got 4 months. Well, one was convicted, but got a sentence of just 4 months because China's probably behind it. Um, it allows Chinese companies to leap over companies while using U.S. technologies and data. So this was first developed back in Silicon Valley, and now China has stolen this information. Again, part of the problem is Apple is working in China. Of course, they're going to take it. And then you get reciprocity. So it goes on it goes on and on. But again, this is part of the problem, and we're going to get into some of the tariffs issues. And we're up in another break, so I need to take a pause now. But we'll finish this up when we come back. Welcome back, everybody. Just want to wrap up this article. A lot of concerns about China, and some people are starting to raise these issues. Republicans and Democrats in Congress, but again, a lot of it is a little bit. It's pretty late in the game. Not only are they China pushing these standards and using this technology to infiltrate the United States, they are dominating markets outside the United States, South America, Africa and other places, and really trying to undercut U.S. production. So it's been a very, we got an immediate benefit by all of our companies going over and having Chinese factories and producing so much in China, and it's really backfired in a big way. So, so the last line here, you can impose regulations as soon as this fall on network cards in the U.S., but is anybody actually going to do it right now? I think our government's kind of floundering right now. No one at the helm with the health of President Joe Biden. So the CCP is giving us a run for our money like no other adversary in history. They're not one to start wars, but they're definitely one to use their military to pressure and force others into worse and worse decisions, all to benefit the Communist Party in China, not necessarily the Chinese people. So hopefully someone wakes up and starts doing something about it. So want to do a deep dive into the topic for the day. And when we get a nominee on the Democrat side, we want to really kind of do a deep dive into this. But there's been a lot of news this weekend over Trump's tax plans. What is he going to do? How is this going to affect Americans? So just want to kind of walk through this and see, kind of walk through there, see what some of the opinions are. Some I agree with, some I think are ridiculous. But I think understanding and having this conversation, because that's one of my biggest issues with the election so far, and it's with Trump as well as Biden, is that we've been talking about all the cases going against Trump. We haven't been talking about the real issues. It's been all about the lawfare against Trump or Biden's health. Those have been the two biggest issues dominating the media. Part of this is the media's fault, but there hasn't been a lot of focus on real issues. So now that Joe Biden has dropped out, there's a lot of speculation about what might happen, but people don't know. So there have been quite a few articles that have actually focused in detail more on what former President Trump might do. So what are his major tax plans? Again, this hasn't been laid out fully. There's been plenty of ideas. He's given indications of what he plans to do. But I think this line is really important. The Trump view is that economic activity is sensitive to tax policy. In other words, people change their economic activity based on the incentives provided by the government. And that can be very true. And it depends on the issue. There's things that are a lot more sensitive to tax increases than others. Oil and gas is one where people have to buy. They have to have gasoline to function in society. So that's why they'll make small cuts and try to avoid driving a little bit more the more that prices and taxes go up. But it's a very inelastic item. So again, it's hard to afford that. But it's hard to avoid the cost of increases in gas However, when you're talking about lobster or luxury items, people can easily buy something else and replace it that's cheaper and not getting taxed when you focus on luxury items. So that's, and economically speaking, it's called being very elastic, which means people can avoid that activity and go somewhere else. So since capital or money is fungible, meaning you can move it around, money or resources moves to where it's more efficiently deployed. And that's true in general. So his whole premise is taxes should be as low as possible to increase economic activity and federal revenue. So, and that's where you get a lot of disagreement as to how does cutting taxes just add more fuel to the fire by giving people more money, or does it lead to increased economic activity where people are buying more and producers produce more. So you want people buying more, but if they just have more dollars and they're chasing the same amount of things, it can lead to inflation. We're going to get to an article on inflation, which I think was one of the first articles I've seen actually diving into inflation. Number one priority of Trump is the extension of the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. Basically, keep taxes where they are or lower them. So I think it's not going to be that hard to keep them in place. Nobody likes to be the one voting for an increase in taxes. Politically, that's just, it hurts. And so this is one of his big things that he's been pushing and doing very openly, that he wants to extend that and make him permanent. Until someone else is elected and they pass their own tax plan. The current flat corporate tax rate of 21% is down from 35% under Barack Obama. And he would like to cut even lower, 15%. He says like 20%, but he'd like 15% even better. So a lot of it is the political capital. How far will he be able to get Congress to go to cut the corporate tax rate? Now, the corporate tax rate, cutting that mainly helps higher income earners. It helps people that are investing and earning money from corporations. But by lowering taxes on corporations, it can really fuel investing, fuel jobs, good job creation. So, number one goal again here is to preserve the 2017 tax reforms, all of it, and then middle class tax cuts, including expanding the standard deduction and child tax credit. So part of this, if you remember a few years back, there was a couple years under Trump where the IRS form, the 1040 form, was cut in half or cut by a third. It's the first time in my life I've seen the tax return get easier. And I don't know if this is still the goal, but at one point he said he wanted tax returns to just be on a postcard. So anybody could do them. It's just easy. And easy to understand, easy to do, easy to track. Part of this is we have a lot of deductions. If you itemize, there's a lot more, but by raising the standard deduction, it's less likely people are going to itemize. So if you itemize, your tax return is going to be a lot more complicated, but raising this standard deduction really does help people all across the board owe less in taxes. So increasing the standard deduction and child tax credit especially helps the middle class, but it also helps people trying to get a leg up. And when you start working and making more money, then you have to pay more in taxes. But it's kind of by increasing the standard deduction, people can earn more money without having to pay in taxes. But the rates are fairly low for the lower classes. So a lot of people don't pay anything in federal income taxes, but what they do get taxed on are payroll taxes, and those are very aggressive, hitting the poorest the most. So this is a big issue out there. Britain has tackled this. Foreign corporate profits are being shielded from domestic taxation. So this is something that Britain has gone the opposite way recently, and we've seen people flee Britain, billionaires move like crazy away from Britain. So one of the biggest issues here is tariffs. So Trump talked about this, and he has mentioned this before, increasing tariffs on China to at least 60%. Why target China? Because of their rampant abuses. Because China has been making money hand over fist off the U.S. economy for a very long time, They don't play fair. They cheat as much as possible. They subsidize and try to undercut American markets, doing a lot of damage to American manufacturing. China is anything but innocent. And I think a high tariff on Chinese goods is a good thing. What it will do, though, is it will make things more expensive in the United States on anything from China. But we do have plenty of other trading partners outside of China. And I would love to see a lot of our goods produced elsewhere or domestically. So we might end up paying a little bit more, but creating American jobs and creating better relationships with trading partners. China, it's absolutely insane that they have most favored nation status. Again, this goes all the way back to Bush and maybe even W, and even further back before him. That we've catered China, we've placated them, even though they haven't deserved it for decades. Now you have this brief idea of eliminating the income tax and replacing it with tariffs. I don't see that happening, mainly because I don't think it's politically feasible. And tariffs have come with their own problems. Tariffs are powerful in the short term. Long term, though, directing our economic might and purchasing power away from China to other allies, I think, is a good idea. Biden responded and saying, well, he's going to raise it to 60%, I'll raise it to 80%. It's always been touted, and it's just like they're trying to outdo each other. Well, let's be serious and someone take on China for their abuses. So a high tariff policy, has its own problems. But many experts saying it will only benefit the wealthiest Americans. So again, I don't see that happening. I'm kind of hoping they don't, because tariffs in the long run have a limited impact. Short term, yes, they can help, but I think that the best part of that is to direct it at China and hit them hard. Now, overall, they want to do a 10%. It's not in this article, but he wants to do a 10% flat tariff rate across the board. Okay. Most other countries usually respond in kind with a similar tariff. There are a lot of countries out there that already have tariffs on U.S. goods, but usually, so the expectation is that they'll just match it, and so it will kind of wipe it out. It was so funny. Just the other day, I had shared one of those soapbox cartoons where we talked about the chicken tax and talked about how tariffs were being used back in the 60s. It was JFK, LBJ's period, and one of them said the biggest headache is that they talked more about chickens than they ever wanted to. Post World War II, the European economy was coming back, but raising chickens was more of an elite good in Europe. It was very expensive and it was treated as a very special dish. However, American manufacturing and farming took over, and we were exporting chickens like crazy. So there's chicken meat being sent all over the world, and it crashed the elite chickens in Europe. All of a sudden, chicken was available to everybody, and the European chicken farmers that were raising chicken just for the very expensive chicken just for elites couldn't compete. So what did Europe do? They slapped them with a huge tariff, hit our chickens with a huge tariff, drove the price right back up to keep things the way they were in Europe. Who does that hurt the most? The average people that can't afford chicken anymore. Anyway, so we responded in kind and taxed any foreign light-duty trucks. So I was just talking to him yesterday how he wanted to import this vehicle. Cars have gotten so expensive here in California. It's like if you go across, or in the United States, he was talking about buying this truck for his business in Mexico. But he's like, if he has to bring it across, he's like, there's some kind of chicken tax. He's like, I don't know where this comes from. This is still around from the 60s that we have this 25% tax on light duty trucks. And this is on it. I kind of laughed. I said, I can tell you the history of it, mainly because of this show. Uh, but tariffs have a huge punitive effect, and they can have a very negative effect long term. So, one of the concerns here is that to have tariffs replace federal income tax, they would have to collect over $2 trillion. Not a good idea to just rely on tariffs. I don't know how serious he was. Probably not. President Trump he likes to talk off the cuff. But again, even then, it's tariffs from the '60s still sticking around, and it was so hilarious that someone talked about this chicken tax on light duty trucks being imported to the United States. So kind of goes more into tariffs. How serious he is about an all tariff policy, I don't think he is. I don't think there's enough support in Congress for that. Another big thing with Trump, no taxes on tips. That's something he announced in Las Vegas. So we don't know if that would be just on federal income tax or exempt them from payroll taxes as well. That does two things. So if you're not paying into the system especially for Social Security, that means you're going to get a smaller Social Security when you retire. But when people working today retire in 20 years, the Social Security system is going to be very different anyway. At least 20% less than today. But this will be, this is a problem where we don't have enough details. We don't have enough. People have been focused on asking, hey, what about this? You declare this. What are the details on this? We haven't been focusing on policy enough. We need more details. And again, this would reduce federal revenues. But at the same time, if people have more money, and economic activity increases, it can absolutely help. So, we're coming up on another break. So, I want to continue this. If you haven't heard about Project 2025, it's kind of interesting. And if you look up Project 2025, or if you watch CNBC, ABC News, MSNBC, CBS, they all have been hammering on Project 2025. And a lot of the media has been asking questions. So this article actually does a good job of explaining what it is. And does it have a good influence? I mean, how serious it is. And I think a lot of the media has been very misleading about this intentionally and trying to tie it to the Trump campaign when they haven't adopted it. It's just an idea, series of ideas being floated around about from the Heritage Foundation, which is a major think tank, but not connected to the Trump campaign. And this has actually been disavowed by the Trump campaign. But we'll dive into it when we get back. More ideas for the future on how to hopefully improve things for our country. Welcome back, everybody. I know this is policy heavy, but I think this is what we need is to actually discuss policies and real things that are going to hurt people instead of platitudes. Um, Watched a funny clip from Cheers, and it was so funny that this politician came into the bar and was going around glad handing, "Oh, do I have your vote? Do you have your vote?" And he came up to Fraser, and Fraser said, "What have you done to deserve my vote?" And he's like, "Well, I've helped," and he just spouted a bunch of things, but he's like, "You didn't say anything." It's like, what specific policies have you done to earn my vote? Where do you stand on the issues? And he's like, and he went on and on about, the politician was great at saying all kinds of things without saying anything. And, he finally Glenn Hannon left and Fraser was frustrated and was like, well, that was great. That was really neat. Cool to see him. And Fraser's like, he didn't say anything. This is actually saying something, going through things, but I think to avoid getting torn apart by the media, both sides have refused to say too much. But again, if we don't have good ideas, good policies to discuss, it's just a popularity contest. And so I think that's really why I want to focus on these issues, what's being discussed. Now, to be very clear, Project 2025, the Democrats have taken this and run with it. So they're trying to hang it around President Trump's neck and say, look, this is something he's going to adopt, da da da. They've even asked him about this. They're asking about it and talking about it all the time in the news. So what is Project 2025? It's a collection of policy proposals from the Heritage Foundation. Has not been adopted by the Trump campaign, has not been, it's just ideas out there. And there are many, many conservative think tanks out there throwing out ideas and coming up with policy ideas that a Republican or conservative president could adopt. These are things that Joe Biden would never adopt, or a liberal or progressive president would not adopt. So again, it's just a series of policy proposals. That's all it is. Nothing focused. President Trump has acknowledged and praised the Heritage Foundation before, but he hasn't accepted it. He said, "Look, it's not part of our campaign." Hasn't accepted in any way, shape, or form. So it's just an idea out there. Democrat think tanks come up with the same thing all the time, but here they're trying to take this and make it the new distraction, you could say, and they're trying to take Project 2025 and hang it around Trump's neck, even though he's not talking about it and he's not supporting it. So that's what it is. Some of the ideas are a lot more radical than the Trump campaign wants to adopt. Or maybe it's these are ideas that they might do and accept. So again, goes back to the how Project 2025 could impact under second Trump term. So they're using language as saying it could possibly be adopted. And they have to use qualifying language because Trump so far has distanced himself from this. So it's just politics and PR and mainstream media running with anything they can to try to hang this around Trump's neck and use it as a boogeyman for liberal voters to coalesce around. So the Biden campaign has been even calling a blueprint for Trump. While it could be if adopted, he hasn't. He's even responded, "I know nothing about Project 2025, have not seen it, I have no idea who's in charge of it, and unlike a very well-received Republican platform." So they have an official platform. These are the ideas that have been officially adopted by the Trump campaign. We were just talking about this. And so, this article actually does a good job at actually laying this down. But again, what Trump's reaction to it is kind of buried in like the 6th or 7th paragraph. Most people, they read the headlines, they read the first couple paragraphs, and that's it. Um, so again, there's been some former Trump officials that have been playing with it, yes, because they're all on this. Trump has praised the Heritage Foundation before in April 22 for some of the work they've done, but doesn't mean he's going to accept everything from them. And so again, Trump campaign spokesman said, as President Trump said, he has nothing to do with Project 2025. The only official policy approved by Trump is the GOP party platform. Find it on its website. It's put out there. You can read it. You can go to it. And then the Heritage Foundation has also responded. As we've been saying for more than 2 years, 2025 Project 2025 does not speak for any candidate campaign. It's a coalition of 110 different conservative groups advocating policy and personal recommendations for the next conservative president. So they're getting these ideas, they're putting them out there, and saying, "Hey," and this happens all the time. You have people on the left always pushing the Biden administration to do different things. Think tanks and groups on the left, and you have the same from the right. Will most of them be adopted? Probably not. But just some of the ideas out there. So since they've talked about it so much, what is it? What is being talked about now that we've kind of laid the foundation of what it's not official policy, hasn't been, it's been disavowed, as not connected to the Trump campaign at all. But the whole idea is to promote prosperity by reducing marginal tax rates and lowering the cost of capital. So lowering the cost of money to be invested into the economy. So capital pretty much refers to money and assets being put into use, into production, to improve the overall production. Build companies, to build manufacturing and help the economy altogether. So one of the proposals is to two flat rates, one of 15, one of 30%. The 30% to start around 168,600. So again, 50% for everybody else, and then jump up to 30%. So lower them drastically all around. Right now, the top tax rate is 30%. Again, it's supposed to go up in 2025 if those expire. So again, make the tax rate simpler and lower. Put more money in people's pockets. It will also eliminate most deductions, credits, and exclusions, including tax breaks for state and local taxes and education. So simplify the whole thing, get rid of most deductions. So there are certain things that the federal government loves for deductions, but if you lower taxes and increase the standard deduction, most people aren't going to be using these deductions anyway. Talks about a national consumption tax or sales tax, which I don't think is a great idea. But these are just a lot of ideas put out there, suggested. Getting them through Congress would be very difficult for some of these, especially for a national tax, sales tax. It has been floated by Democrats. Getting that through Republicans hopefully would be, I would oppose it. And then lower taxes on capital gains. So again, cutting that down to 15%. Right now the top rate is 20%. So those are your current rates, and this is an extra thing, an extra 3.8% levy on assets for high earners that kicks in when their modified adjusted gross income exceeds 200 or 250,000 for married couples. So right now they pay a combined 23.8% on capital gains tax. So again, it reduces. So this is a big deal for higher income investors, encouraging people to invest more in the economy and grow the economy. We have huge estate and gift tax limitations. Again, this benefits the wealthiest the most, but it's idea is to reduce it down to 20%. And right now it's at 40%. 40% is pretty punitive. So people give yearly gift taxes to try to avoid that. There's a limit on how much you can give and avoid this penalty. But if you give a massive gift to someone, the person giving the gift has a huge tax. Estate taxes only hit a very small amount of people currently, and that's supposed to drop as well. Again, tariffs, I'm not going to dive into them. We already talked a lot about that. IRS plans. Democrats increased funding by $90 billion or so in the Inflation Reduction Act. Are they using that wisely? I would argue absolutely not. They're creating more layers of bureaucracy. They're making it harder on taxpayers. They're becoming more aggressive, auditing everybody, including the poorest Americans, sometimes targeting the poorest Americans. So it was $80 billion from the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022. So the Republicans are calling for budget cuts, at least 20% cuts for the higher resources that they got, and instead funneling that money to the Office of Taxpayer Advocate. I think this is a great idea. Is the IRS using their money wisely? Efficiently? No. Is the Office Taxpayer Advocate completely overwhelmed? Absolutely. It takes them 6 to 9 months to assign someone to a case. And even then, they're so overwhelmed, you have to be on top of them. You have to stay with them. But when they function very well for the most part. And I've been able to help out quite a few of my clients through this. So this is something I think is a great idea. We need to change the leadership of the IRS. It's absolutely atrocious right now, and hurting the poorest the most. But improving the taxpayer advocate, funding them more, I think is huge. Instead of pouring money into it, more audits, more collections, going after people more and more. There's some people that deserve to be audited, but we're seeing more and more people that they're getting audited for older years that they don't have any information for, or the IRS is rejecting and forcing people to jump through more and more hoops just to get what they are legally entitled to. And that's the kind of gamesmanship that really upsets me and hurts people, makes it so hard to work with the IRS on your own that people have to hire attorneys. That is not good for the economy. It's not good for taxpayers. So I need to move on to the last article, and I might end up running out of space. This is from CBS News. Again, actually diving into some of the pros and cons of Trumponomics, I guess that's a new phrase for it. They're saying it could drive up prices, and it absolutely could, especially in the short term. So, rule of thumb here, if you increase money without more goods to purchase, you're going to see inflation. So this is they're talking about, hey, we could have President Trump is campaigning one of these things, and I haven't heard this a lot, but to end the inflation nightmare, and he has talked about the high inflation under the Biden administration ad nauseum. So some of these things, increased tariffs, tax cuts, and a crackdown on immigration could lead, well, they say they're likely to, and I think they're being a little biased here, to cause a flare-up in inflation. Can some of these lead to more inflation? Absolutely. More money in people's hands. Generally it's used better and more efficiently than the government. And they're claiming that it could go up to 3.6% instead of the goal of 2%. So again, they're using rosy numbers from the Biden administration saying, look, it could drop down to 2.4% or edge down to that. That's not real inflation. Everybody knows that. Tariffs can cause things to go up. So depending on how quickly they want it to go up, it could be a real problem. So one of the big differences here, and I'm running out of time. We've got about a minute left, so I might want to actually tackle this another day. As long as you're either decreasing demand or increasing supply, prices will go down. What's one of the first things that Trump is going to do? Free up oil exploration. He's going to reopen oil that has been shut down and stymied under the Biden administration. And that will cause the price of oil to go down. Why will it cause it to go down? Because you will have more oil produced in the United States, more expectation that oil futures will be much higher under a Trump administration. And just like when he was president the first time, that will drive oil prices down. That will have a huge impact throughout the economy. And one of the things it talks about in this article is immigration. So you'll have less demand when you actually close the border, demand for housing, demand for goods, and that will drive prices down. We're out of time. We'll have to finish up on this tomorrow. Have a great day, and again, stay informed, and we will see you tomorrow.